Jad. Sincerely, one of the traits that we stress here at OAS is to become an active Canadian citizen. This year, we are privileged to have amongst us Amira Al-Qawabi. She obtained a degree in journalism and law at Carleton University in 2001. Since then, she has worked both as a full-time and freelance journalist, writing and producing stories and a commentary for a variety of media, including the Globe and Mail, the Toronto Star, CBC Radio, and Middle Eastern Times. She joined the Canadian Council on American Islamic Relations in 2012 to promote the civic engagement of human rights of Muslims in Canada. We are honored to have among us Amira Al-Qawabi.
Bismillah. Good morning, everyone. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I am absolutely honored to be here with you today as you mark this important milestone in your lives with your friends and family. In preparing myself to talk to you, I did what anyone does in these circumstances. I consulted Google. And I realized that there is a wealth of great advice out there for young grads like yourselves. Like this one: the person who graduates today and stops learning tomorrow is uneducated the day after. But I don't think it's enough to offer a few lovely quotations, waxing poetic about our futures, but rather I'd prefer to weave stories around these words of wisdom, because it is through stories that I believe we can truly learn and understand the world around us and our place in it. In fact, this idea of storytelling is a strong theme for me, and one I've been constantly sharing with Canadian Muslims, reminding everyone that all cultures and faiths define themselves through stories. It is how we can shape our identities. And while many of our heritages celebrated the sharing of stories through the written or spoken words for ages, it saddens me that contemporary Muslims, today's Muslims, don't always value our storytellers or encourage each other to tell stories, i.e. our journalists, our artists, our filmmakers, our television producers, our novelists, even our comedians. And they are out there, and I suspect potentially in here. The Quran mentions storytelling. There's a whole chapter called The Stories, and various verses like this one from Al-A'raf, the Heights. So relate the stories that perhaps they will give thought. And this one from Surah Yusuf. In their story, there is a lesson for the people of understanding. So I'm going to share a few stories with you this morning, and I hope they will emphasize what the important things are in life. The first quote that I'll weave a story around is this one: learn everything you can, anytime you can, from anyone you can. There will always come a time when you will be grateful you did. To me, that means that we should welcome knowledge from whatever source it comes from, but not to accept blindly, no. In fact, Albert Einstein said it best when he said, the important thing is not to stop questioning. So we need to realize that education is all around us, not just in the classrooms, and we must be open to it. So there was a man who was born on the African continent into a family that really valued education. He was fortunate, like all of us, to have been given an excellent opportunity to learn various subjects. But it wasn't about just getting great marks. He was all about observing the world around him and realizing what he was all right with and what he wanted to change. With his education, which he called the most powerful weapon in which a person can change the world, he proceeded to make effects politically, socially, and economically in his own country, and he eventually moved governments around the world to recognize his cause. But it didn't come easy. He had to first spend 27 years in prison to prove his point, as the government of the day refused to change and respect and treat all citizens equally. But when he did prove his points, it finally meant that people in his country of all colors would be treated fairly. After his freedom from prison, he went on to being the president of his country and was honored with hundreds of awards, including the Nobel Peace Prize. He is Nelson Mandela, known as Madiba, the father of the South African nation. He is still alive, but has entered old age and is currently in hospital. The world is praying for him. The next quote is for parents. Sometimes we all focus on encouraging our children to excel in school. I know all of the students here have certainly heard mom or dad or both getting on your case enough times about doing homework. But what if the most important lesson has nothing to do with your books? It was what Marriott Edelman said when she put this quote out: "Being considerate of others will take your children further in life than any college degree." So being considerate of others will take your children further in life than any college degree. In the 1960s, in the US, there were also struggles for equality rights for all people. People were treated differently based on the color of their skin. So one day, a brave third-grade teacher decided to show her class what it felt like to be discriminated against. Her name was Jane Elliott, and she did a remarkable experiment, now making the rounds on Facebook. See, Facebook can be educational. She divided her class based on eye color. So one day, blue-eyed kids were treated better, had more privileges, more opportunities, and more praise than brown-eyed kids. The brown-eyed kids were forced to wear a collar to identify them, and were told not to play with the blue-eyed kids, not to drink from the same water fountain, and were constantly put down. The following day, the reverse was done, but it was the brown-eyed kids who were treated as superior. What was remarkable about her experiment was that the group of children who were privileged on any given day were the ones who excelled in their schoolwork, and the ones who were treated unfairly were the ones who could not excel, who were less inspired to work, who essentially wanted to give up. With that experiment, later made into a documentary called The Eye of the Storm, that teacher showed everyone in America that discrimination and racism could only harm people and reinforce negative stereotypes about the other. Treat others badly, and they would respond badly, becoming less productive and less a part of our communities. That teacher taught her students to be more considerate of others and to imagine what it would be like to be in other people's shoes, a hugely important lesson. And it leads to this quote by Maya Angelou: "I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel." And that brings me to Frank's story. This is a story you won't find on Facebook. This is one of the stories I have been privileged to observe and learn from. Frank was a young man in the prime of his life when a skiing accident caused him to be paralyzed. In an instant, his high school years were done, his future over. His family had to move him into a hospital. He couldn't speak, he couldn't move, he couldn't feed himself. He spent 17 years living in that hospital, his family never far away. In fact, his mother was always by his side, and his siblings were there frequently. He was surrounded by love, and despite his situation, he gave love back. Yes, he gave love back. How? When he couldn't speak or move or write, there was something he still could do, something that touched every single person who visited him, every single nurse who supported him, every single doctor who watched over him. He could smile. His smile would light up a room. He was always glad to see you. And I was in the room when 17 years of living like that, he slowly passed away. And everyone, the staff, his family, me, we cried. Because he had impacted all of us, all with his smile. Finally, this quote: "A people without the knowledge of their past history, origin, and culture is like a tree without roots." Roots. Roots are so important, and as you move ahead, hoping to treat others well, to be remembered for your smile, be helpful to the world, you will need to remember and honor your roots. I was once in a beautiful Egyptian seaside resort, walking through countless gardens of colorful, dazzling flowers, reds, pinks, blues, yellows, petals of every shape and size. But strangely, when I leaned over to smell them, nothing, no fragrance. Why? I searched high and low for the gardener at the resort, wanting to know why all these brilliant flowers had no scent. I found an old, wise man watering some plants near where the hotel's maids and cooks live. I asked him, "Are there no flowers here with a scent?" He looked at me and smiled. "You want a flower with a scent?" He bent over and pulled out a plain-looking flower, one I hadn't even noticed, and he offered it to me. "Smell this," he said. The fragrance hit me before I had even come close to it. The smell was rich, beautiful, though the flower was plain. "What is this?" I asked. "This is Rayhan," he explained, "the only flower whose roots are here. The others have been brought from all over the world, but this one has maintained its roots." The lesson? Maintain your roots. Keep your identities as you move forward into the world. It's not about dazzling, but about being true, and your essence will be fragrant. Once upon a time, I told the story of the Ottawa Islamic High School when it first started on CBC Radio. Everyone who heard that story, heard the young people excited about finally having a high school in Ottawa for Muslim kids, was touched. That was a story I told back then, and now today's grads will go into the world and continue that story. So go forward into the world, eyes and ears wide open, ready to embrace the lessons God puts in front of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Amira, for sharing with us your stories and encouraging us to share our stories and to listen to other stories as well. Next, we have a message from David McGinty, who is unfortunately unable to be with us today. On his behalf, our Vice Principal, Muhammad Isa, will share with us his words.
Dear graduating class from the Ottawa Islamic School, I am unfortunately unable to be here today, but I send my congratulations to each and every one of you. I believe everyone at your ceremony today has a reason to be proud. To the graduates, this is the beginning of your success. Keep in mind always the word of the famous Canadian writer, Stephen Leacock, who once said, "The harder you work, the luckier you get." To the teachers and staff who have fostered their abilities, these students are an attribute and a testimony to your skill and hard working. To the parents and families, thank you for the effort, support, and encouragement that you have given your kids. My very best wishes to each and every one of you. David McGinty, MP, Ottawa South.